Hey, what's up my people? IceRestrict12 here. Today I'm coming at you with a brand new 5 tips to make you a better Yu-Gi-Oh player. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. Tip number 1, understand what kind of Yu-Gi-Oh player you are. And what I mean by that is that knowing exactly what kind of player you are is going to help you so that you have realistic expectations of what you're trying to get out of this game. So what I mean by that is, for instance, if you are someone who's just getting back into the game, and I've seen this happen before, it's very common for players that are getting back into the game to start building nostalgic decks. So what I mean by that is, you probably used to play the game as a kid, you're getting back into it, and the first deck you want to build is something like Dark Magician, Blue Eyes White Dragon. I myself did exactly that. When I got first back into the game, I wanted to build the most competitive version of a deck like Relinquished, which is by far my favorite archetype. Now, understand that if you're building these decks, you need to keep your expectations realistic, because in Yu-Gi-Oh, not every deck was created equal. There are objectively decks that are better than others, no matter how hard you try to make one deck competitive. So if you're getting back into the game and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna play the decks that I like, there's nothing wrong with that. Just understand that chances are that the deck that you enjoy playing will not top a tournament. Very well, guys, let's go ahead and move forward. Now, tip number 2 is very simple. It kind of ties a little bit to what I said before about, there's always like 5 decks that are better than everyone else. Objectively, of course, because, one cool thing about Yu-Gi-Oh is that there's such thing as a bad hand. So even if you're playing a casual deck, or if you are playing a rogue deck, every now and then you'll get a win against like the #1 deck just because they bricked, and it's an awesome feeling. But with that being said, guys, like I said, objectively, there are decks that are better than others. So get familiar with at least the top 5 decks in the format. So look at tournaments, look at your locals, and you will always see like a couple decks that are performing really well. And the reason why I want you to get familiar with those decks is because you will face them at locals, at important events. They will be there. So at least be familiar with what they do. I'm not asking you to learn the whole deck, but at least know the basics of what they do so you can understand some of the interactions that you're going to be having with them, and also so you can understand some of the weak points. There's, dozens of different decks in Yu-Gi-Oh, and so I'm not going to ask you to go and look at every single one of them, but at least pick the top 5 decks that you're going to be going against or that are dominating the meta, because trust me, you will face those decks. And tip number 3, guys, is when you are watching deck profile videos from players that are playing the same deck that you are playing, take it with a grain of salt. And what I mean by that, and also that actually includes my videos as well. When I put a deck profile video, take it with a grain of salt as well. And this is what I mean, is when we create deck profile videos, a lot of players will tell you straight up what kind of meta they build this deck to counter. But a lot of times when we build our decks, or when we show like a first place, deck that did really well, keep in mind that sometimes we build our decks with our particular competitive environment in mind. So for instance, if a player goes to his locals and it's full of Dark Magician and, Adignister and all these other decks, he might build that particular deck to counter these strategies. So you copy that deck exactly, then you go to your locals, which has no Dark Magician, no Adignister, and then you lose because you played a bunch of decks that you were not ready for. So what I mean by that is it's really cool to watch these videos. I myself learn a lot from a lot of awesome content creators when when building my own deck, but always take it with a grain of salt. First and foremost, look at your competitive environment, what you are going to go against, and then try to counter that. So especially when it comes to things like tech cards or hand traps or just regular traps, a lot of times we put these traps to counter very specific decks that we might encounter at our locals, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to encounter those decks at your locals. Moving on to tip number 4, this is actually a very simple one. Be aware of the ban list, especially if you are a casual player. So what I mean by that is, if you're going to locals, a lot of times when there's a card that is restricted or that is forbidden, players may not be aware of the card being restricted or forbidden, or they might have looked at the ban list and then they thought it was a certain card that was forbidden, but it turned out to be another one. They misremembered, so now you're playing against them and you're like, man, I really wish I could play 2 or 3 copies of Call by the Grave, but then your opponent suddenly drops 2 or 3 on you and you're like, wait, what? I thought this card was restricted to 1. So just be aware of the ban list. Super simple. Competitive players usually are on top of this because, again, they are competitive players. These guys are playing the top decks. They're keeping up with tournament results. they're looking at deck profiles, they're going to regionals, they're you know, they're on the top tables, so they will know. But you know, I've encountered this with casual players where I'll be playing someone, you know, who's running a cool, you know, nostalgic deck like you know, like Black Wings, and then suddenly they drop 2 cards that, you know, are restricted to 1, and I'm like, you check the forbidden list, and they're like, oh, I thought this was, I was like, that's fine, man, no worries, just, you know, take that one out and then draw 1 card and play that one, no big deal, unless you know, you're playing like top 4 or something like that, or playing for game prices. I usually don't make a big deal about it, but yes, just be aware of the ban list. Very well, guys, and we made it to the end of the video with tip number 5. Now, tip number 5 is just take a break. Yep, just like that. Every now and then, guys, you know, you need to take a break. And what I mean by that is Yu-Gi-Oh! Can be a game that we can get very invested into. Not only because it's actually a very complex and competitive game, but also because some of these cards are worth hundreds of dollars. So, you know, as you build your decks, go to tournaments, play online, a lot of times we can get frustrated, whether, you know, you keep breaking, your opponent keeps, you know, pulling that 1 card that ruins your day, you keep driving for locals just to end last. You know, it can be very frustrating. So if you catch yourself not having fun, because remember, at the end of the day, this is just a game. It's meant to be fun. So if you find yourself not enjoying this game at all, getting frustrated and getting mad, you can turn into a very toxic player, and nobody likes that. So, you know, if you catch yourself being toxic, maybe you're playing online and your opponent is taking 5 seconds to read one of your cards, and you're already typing, "Come on, man, hurry up, man!" You know, like, relax. It's a game. It's meant to be enjoyed. If you're playing with, you know, people at locals, and you know they're going through their plays, and you're getting, you know, you're losing your patience because, you know, this guy's asking questions or something, dude, again, it's just a game. If you find yourself, you know, doing that, take a break, skip locals this weekend, and then, you know, clear your head, and then next week, you know, take your deck apart, see why you keep breaking, see why you keep losing, and then, you know, make the required adjustments to your deck, and then take it from there, man. But every now and then, if you're not having a good time, just take a break. Trust me, once you get back into the game, you will enjoy it a lot more. Alright, guys, so that is the end of the video. Thank you again for taking the time to watch these videos. It really means the world to me, guys. If you like my content, please go ahead and give me a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.